Hi there. I just want to go through today's slides for you. We're looking at how we look at health and safety, nutrition and wellness as part of how we provide quality care for children and how we provide a quality experience for ourselves in our own lives, because that's just as important as looking after the children that we're caring for. So in order to have a quality of life, first you are a being, so you're recognized as someone of value. You belong to different groups, and we looked at this, as I said today in class, when we looked last semester at the Bronfenbrenner models, and we look at where we want to go, what we're becoming. So in order to do that, there are a system of social determinants, things that determine whether we have a potential to be a healthy and well-engaged, happy, safe person, or whether there are some things in our environment that set us up for possible problems and hurdles to have to try and get over. These, as I mentioned in class, are quite numerous, and there are some that are particularly important for early childhood education, but some that are on the periphery, just so on the outside edges, just like in the Bronfenbrenner model, the further out from the child that you were raising out you got, the impact was more community-based and environmental. So if you take a look here, you will see all of the different ones that are impacting. You can probably see very clearly the ones that have the greatest impact on children, education, and their ability to read and have literacy, both in math, numbers, and in words. The social environments that children find themselves in, physical environments like childcare centers and home environments, the personal health and practices that a child or an adult has, and the coping skills. So coping skills are the ideas of resiliency and the way that a child manages stress, anger, emotions of a wide variety. Healthy child development, so are things in place to meet the child's basic needs. The biology and the genetic DNA that every child is born with, so that are they faced based on their DNA with more difficult situations, special needs, disability, and are they likely to grow big and strong, or are they likely to be a small, weaker individual just in their biological development? The health services that are available to them in their community, affordable by their family. Their gender plays a role in that. Their culture, whether they strongly believe in medicine or whether their culture is one of handing it over to a god that would determine whether a child would live or die. Those things are impacting children's health, and we may disagree with them, but they are part of the culture of the families that we may have in our centers. Income and social status, so that is, as we mentioned in class today, where people live, their income and status in countries like India, where there's still a strong caste system. The social status may matter greatly, as whether they have access to social supports, to social environments, to healthy development practices, employment and working conditions. And as I talked about this morning, that is greatly impacted by world events and events here close to home in the pandemic, and how it's implicating the ability to work and make a livelihood right now in Ontario. So those are an overview of the determinants. This is a list of them. I'm not going to go through that again, but you can look at it this way if that's more helpful for you than in a visual format. The question here, the following is not a determinant of health: income and social status, injury from a fall, culture, social support networks. So make a little guess and then we'll see what was right. The answer is injury from a fall. That can happen anywhere regardless of social status, regardless of wealth. A fall is a physical trip, so that is not part of the determinants of health, but it is part of a safety plan to make sure that children don't have those things in their way. Housing insecurity. So you need to currently spend half or more of a month's income on rent and mortgage. These are some things that families are facing, and again, in the pandemic, they're facing them to a differing higher degree, but these are common problems where there is poverty, and there is poverty everywhere, in the richest city in the world and in the poorest country in the world. Population in Canada, we have a population health approach. It's investing upstream, so putting the efforts that we have not into looking backwards to fixing problems, but to looking at how we prevent problems. It's based on evidence, and there are lots of strategies to support that. Canada collaborates across different levels and sectors. That means that it looks at different strategies within the political structure. So Canada is a country that has provinces and territories, and so they work across those levels, the province and territory level. They also work across the local level of a city government or regional government. And sectors in that looks at whether it's funding sectors, business, health, safety, whether it's looking at teaching and language and literacy and education, or the medical and health fields. It's looking at all of those to make it a healthier, safer community for Canadians to live in. So the federal responsibilities, federal means in Canada, that's the Canadian. So you'll see the word Canada used in these acts. Canada Health Act, Canada Health Transfer, which is the money that's sent from the federal government to each of the province or territories, and then the funding and delivering of health care, which is done on a more local or regional level, as well as the provincial level. Provincial and territory, Canada Health Act provides access to the principles that they designed, and they fund the supplementary without excluding particular groups. So there's Aboriginal funding, there is funding for seniors, funding for the military services, funding for infants and toddlers. So they're broken up into those different kinds of categories. The federal system regulates and protects the health, looking at overall issues like consumer safety and disease surveillance. That's why the pandemic with COVID has been first a challenge for the federal government, and then its policies are downloaded to the provincial and regional territorial governments, and that's where they do the actual work to help and promote safety. The provincial government then provides these independent workers' compensation agencies, so if someone was to be hurt on a job. So that is why it is so important that you do your health and safety training, and it's done under the Ontario government, and it gives you information about how to be safe in a work environment. So once that is done, then the college also provides insurance for you while you're in your field placements, and then your employer would provide insurance for you with the Workmen's Compensation Act. There's two components in our system. There's a primary health, which looks at the services that are first given to a person. So that is the idea of medical service available, and practices and social services that go together to make sure you get those. Then there's a public health care system that provides a large range, but it's not everything. So it looks at health policies, it looks at ways to support community health development, it looks at immunizations, and it looks at the standards for inspection to make sure that Canada is meeting those milestones. So that's our public health care system that is universal and lets all Canadians have that right. There are then Ontario health cards, British Columbia health cards, that give you access to those services within your province or territory. So it brings together a number of different health providers. It looks at, so that's dental, medical, mental health, a variety of different things that are covered in our OHIP, Ontario Health Plan. And then it also looks at the mental health aspects and social work network that we need to have access to. So being able to access a social worker if your family's experiencing a really difficult time, if child abuse is suspected, all of these pieces go together under this large plan, and it benefits both individuals and the community. A holistic care plan looks at what are we looking at from a whole person? Just like last semester, we looked at the whole child. We looked at their physical, social, emotional, cognitive development, which included language and speech. So we looked at the whole child. So a holistic approach to health is then looking at the whole person. I can't just treat a medical injury. I have to treat disease. I have to treat emotional health. I have to treat the entire person and then where that person is living. So it's a collective. We're using a variety of services to do that, and it's a whole person approach. Health promotion is the idea that we are, and that's what your pamphlet is going to be about, that we are taking known issues of health concern or health medical concern, and we're taking those and making them bigger and stronger by promoting how to be healthy. So again, looking forward, and if you look back at what Canada's strategy is looking at prevention. So by promoting healthy safety regulations, by promoting the safe way to use a car seat, the safe way to breastfeed, look after your child, then we're looking at preventing illness, preventing accidents, and we're having a focus of promoting health in our communities. Mental health promotion. This is a definition from the Canadian government, our capacity to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life and deal with the challenges. You could also say that this is, well, I'm going to try and, no, I'm not going to try and do that. This is resiliency. So when we try and make our lives better, we look for ways to cope and solve problems, and that becomes a resilient behavior that we have. Health promotion in early childhood settings. So this is where we get into, now that we have a background, what do we actually do as early childhood educators? What is our role? How can we help in this setting? We need to understand, and this is an older census, 2017, but it's the last one I have access to. But if you look here, and I can do this, I can highlight, Ontario, 18.4% 5 years ago, for rates in Canada. 18.4% of the Canadian children living in Ontario live below the poverty line. Prince Edward Island is higher, you can see here. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. These are the eastern coast provinces that have had a great deal of economic impact on their ability to make money. So that impacts again then what happens. You can see here Quebec is lower and Alberta is lower. These are going to change and fluctuate. What this doesn't show you though are the provinces. These are provinces. It doesn't show you the territories, and the territories provide different risk of poverty. So which children are likely to experience poverty? 17.4% of Canadian children in general. You can see that down here, looking here at the color, this is Aboriginal children. These are the Indigenous, First Nation, and Métis. That is different in terms of how the First Nations, which is a grouping of Indigenous or Aboriginal families, their rate is at the highest. 32% here, immigrant children, new Canadians that are coming. And that's pretty realistic when you think about coming to a new country, finding a new job, learning a new language, finding places to live. Those can put you in that position of being less able to provide for your children than what you would hope to be. Children of color, it refers to here as racialized children. These are most often children of color that face this type of discrepancy, and again, it's about the ability to find employment and to be paid at the same rate as others. And this would be strictly Indigenous, not looking at the Métis populations or Inuit. And Métis live There's a large population of Métis Canadians living in the eastern provinces and a large number of the Inuit people that live in the northern territories. Developing health comes from two different areas. Population health, trying to make the population as healthy as possible, and then secondly, adding in the looking at how the brain development is affected and impacted by our genetic makeup and then by the environmental factors. So we looked a lot at this last semester in the beginning of the course ECP 103, Healthy Development of a Child. And so that's this part. The population part is more what we're doing this semester. So that's really important to understand from that perspective. Developmental health looks like over the lifespan. So the trends that are coming from what we can see in the past for children's development and how either the environment and the circumstances are improving or becoming worse for children and families. So right now in 2020, 2021, and now starting into 22, the lifelong health implications from COVID are still not known, but we do know that it is impacting the families and lives of children. Measures of physical growth, cognition are predictors of adult life, so we're looking at those indicators. The problem is we don't know the impact of children being isolated, not having their peers to play with, to being out of school and not having face-to-face learning on computers, things that have never happened before that we have to now study and look at how is that going to impact this particular generation and how their overall health is impacted when you look at the determinants of health. Okay, so looking at what's good for children in a multi-ethnic view, that means a culturally diverse, non-racialized, non-judgmental or discriminatory manner. Adults in children's lives respect each other. That's a culturally competent, good environment. Adults in children's lives work together to understand each other's perspectives. Caregivers and parents understand how program and family values might be different, might vary, but they work together to creating a strong system. And adult in children's lives create ongoing dialogues. So these are the roles and responsibilities of the adults. And as an adult who will be working with children, these will become part of what you're responsible for as you start your work with the children. Elements of quality, this is pulling from last semester in ECP 104, a high adult to child ratio. That means lower numbers of children and more adults create quality care, and small group sizes. Well-defined spaces and post-secondary education. So a well-defined environment for children, how it's aesthetically presented. So is it messy, cluttered, not easy to navigate, or is it clean, beautiful, calming, inviting, encouraging? And then the fact that you're all getting your post-secondary education. Lots of curriculum that's well planned with a purpose in mind that is open to the information that Karen's teaching you in the child at the center of curriculum, that the child is the center and that you're working to meet what the child's interests and development and abilities are, and you're creating that in cooperation with the children. Positive relationships between children and educators. That's thinking about the guidance course that you're taking right now. So how does the environment and my relationship with children determine how I'm going to interact with children and how I'm going to guide their behavior and help them develop their own strategies for solving problems in the future. Relationships between families and caregivers. You don't have to be a best friend to a parent, but you need to be respectful. You need to be open and able to listen, to find out how they handle health concerns, how they handle safety, how they handle nutrition in their home, in their culture, and then responding to that in an appropriate way. Group care does have some limitations about how we do things, But we're finding one of the benefits of living through COVID is we're finding that we can make changes and minute adaptations that make children feel more comfortable, more safe, and more secure. So that's going to be something that will continue. Health policies, we're looking at the licensing of childcare centers. So those are some of the policies that you started to look at last semester at the end of the course around Toronto health policies, the City of Toronto, that we will go into much more detail this semester as they relate specifically to childcare centers. Using staff training and performance appraisals. So you will be appraised of your performance, but through a student lens, as a student teacher. The staff in centers that work there are appraised through their own systems, and they are required by law to go through professional development yearly in order to maintain their status as a registered early childhood educators. And then all of the policies are available to parents, so they know what the rules and explanations are. And you've already ran into that with some looking at the COVID and the Early Years Act. Define communication lines and confidentiality. Confidentiality is the most important health procedure, health and safety procedure that you as an early childhood educator will be responsible to do. Confidentiality happens at the highest level, always, every day. Then there's the disseminating of knowledge and information that has to be done with a parent's consent. And then sometimes if there's a system of abuse that you're concerned about, that you may not need to give the parents information, that you are filling out a form about potential abuse, but that will come in a later course. Information sheets. When you go into the infant and toddler room, you will be filling out daily information sheets that tells the parent all of the things related to health and safety that have happened during the day. So what the child has eaten, drank during the day, their sleep patterns, their play patterns, whether they've had bowel movements. Remember, infants and toddlers don't have a strong vocabulary or adult vocabulary, and so those things need to be recorded and documented on a formal sheet. Now, depending on where you're placed in the circumstances, you may or may not be able to complete any forms, but you will certainly have access to see those forms, and we will be talking about them as well here. Identify a programs network within the community, so that's the connection. So the Toronto Board of Health, the Toronto Public Health Unit, fire, dietitians and nutritionists, the things that are all part of the community that help make that center a safe and viable community. And research, you are finding out, as I mentioned this morning, you're going to be daily finding out the kind of health practices that are changing around health and safety with respect to Omicron and any future variants of COVID.